Hello, everybody. I'm Ricky Wallace, Chairman of the SIP Surrey and Sussex branch, and today I'd like to welcome Frederick Phillipson. Frederick is an Oracle subject matter expert who works for Redress Compliance, who has in the past set up the Oracle practice at leading Tier 1 reseller Insight, and is known as a renowned expert in this area. We have some history of working together previously, where Frederick has run a webinar for us last year, and I'm very much looking forward to this interview. The purpose of this interview is to enable any procurement people understand a bit more about Oracle in terms of licensing, audits, and potential cost-saving opportunities. So I have a number of questions here that I'm going to ask. I'm going to start with those questions now. So hello, Eric. Frederick, nice to see you again.
Hi, Ricky. It's good to be here.
Thank you. First of all, we understand that in the current economic climate, Oracle are still looking to put their prices up by 20 to 25%. Can you suggest how companies negotiating with Oracle would look to deal with this?
So it's that's a very good question, Ricky, and it's a few things that everybody needs to keep in mind when they are negotiating with Oracle. Is that Oracle is not transparent about how they discount their cloud services or their on-premise software. And it's very much that you can be a very large Oracle customer paying millions of pounds to Oracle, and you could have a less discount than a customer who is buying less Oracle software. And Oracle, compared to Microsoft, where if you're a Microsoft customer, Microsoft has been very transparent. If you're a D category customer, you have these kind of discounts. With Oracle, there's nothing like it. And just knowing that you can have a discount from anything from 0% and even up to 99% discount. Everything is about how you approach Oracle. You need to approach Oracle in any negotiation. You need to be sure about your compliance position, because if there's any uncertainties about a compliance situation, Oracle will exploit that. Is that it's quite common that if you do not accept an Oracle proposal or contract, they might audit you in the next coming quarter, for example. That's quite common. And that's why you need to, if you're uncertain, if you're compliant or not, and Oracle raises that question, you might be more eager to accept their discount level or their contract proposal because of a fear of audit. And it's the same goes with the contract. And because the Oracle is there, when you meet with Oracle, they're going to sound you off. They will detect how much does he or she know about Oracle contracts and licensing. If they notice that you don't have enough knowledge, they will exploit that. And so it's important to come prepared knowing what is your licensing position, what does your contract say. And most important thing is that you need to have an alternative to Oracle, because I used to work at Oracle, and if Oracle knows that you're running an application, let's say application A, and this application is running on Oracle database. If you go to the Oracle and say, we're looking at expanding Oracle A platform, we need to have more databases or expand their system. Oracle have no reason at all to give you any sort of discounts on that purchase, because they know that you're going to choose Oracle no matter what. So it's about keeping your cards very close to your chest to make Oracle believe that if they don't give you a good enough offer, you're going to take your business elsewhere. And that's sort of how Oracle is approached. You need to approach any negotiation with Oracle. And I think part of this is that Oracle is going to follow other vendors, is that they are going to offer much less discounts on on-premise software going forward, because they don't have that many sales reps being compensated for on-premise software. I think Microsoft did something similar a few years ago, where it's only compensated on cloud. And it's if nobody's being compensated, or a few people are being compensated on-premise software, it's not the same. You will not have the same discount as you had in the past. So I often recommend companies, if you are going to make a purchase, you should be trying to negotiate a frame agreement with Oracle. Frame agreement is basically a simple thing as a price hold, so that you have fixed discount, for Oracle technology price list or whatever products you're looking at buying. Because if you have that fixed price list, that will usually last for, it can be up to 5 years. So no matter how Oracle is changing their go-to-market, you will have this discount, because Oracle is like any other company. They want to discount their cloud services and give less discount for on-premises, so that you're going to buy their cloud services instead.
Okay, very good. Yeah, and typically, who is a credible competitor? Who would be seen as a credible competitor?
So you need to do a sort of a market research depending on the product you're buying, because Oracle have 1,000 products, right? So when it comes to Oracle ERP, for example, you need to maybe look at, I think, SAP. When it's about on-premise software databases, you have a multiple, you have open source, you have Microsoft. So you need to do a bit of a research, which are like the competitors here. You also need to make sure that your IT department. So what's happening is that your IT department or business application people are meeting with Oracle, and they're having a 3-month conversation, and then this ends up at the procurement table, and your application or business side or IT people have already told Oracle everything. And then you're sitting here as the IT procurement, what can I do about it? And you might be happy, okay, if I just get 5% more discount, then maybe you can fulfill your KPI. But in reality, maybe you should have had 40% discount if you're nobody at your business IT or have told Oracle, we're going to choose you. That happened not long ago when I was helping a client who has been speaking with Oracle for over a year. And Oracle could easily, hey, we know everything about your environment. We know all of your plans. And suddenly the IT procurement were basically, hey, talk to our IT procurement about buying the software that we need. Oracle is going to realize, hey, we already know that you're going to buy this no matter what. You don't have a viable alternative, right? So it's about communicating this with anyone who is working with Oracle software in your company. Don't be open that Oracle is the only choice.
Okay, so probably an earlier engagement with IT procurement as well, in terms of working more closely with IT in that instance from the start, so that there isn't the fait accompli at the end of it. Oh, it's very, very useful, Frederick. Thanks for that. So, along the same lines, what are the 5 key things that companies need to consider when negotiating a contract with Oracle?
So I would start with Oracle software is so expensive, right? So let's start by number 1. You need to have an audit protection in your contract, and that is, there's a few contract terms you need to focus on. It's the customer definition, which basically allows you to say which entities in your organization can use the Oracle software. You also need to look at the territory clause. It specifies where can you deploy Oracle software. Those are quite important when it comes to an Oracle license audit. You should also be negotiating the audit clause in the Oracle contracts, and there's basically make sure that you're compliant with your contract. Second, you need to make sure that you have the flexibility to use the Oracle software across your organization. Often a common mistake is that a subsidiary are buying the Oracle software, and then a few years down the line, or even very shortly after, it's not only the subsidiary that will be using the Oracle software, but it's other legal entities. Imagine that if you're a large company and you have subsidiaries around the world, you might have some spare licenses in one region. But if you don't have the right contract terms to use them in another region, you might have to buy them in one region instead of just moving them to another subsidiary. Thirdly, I call this what-if scenarios. So you need to have contract text dictating the process for when your company is involved in merger and acquisitions, divestitures. If you do not have the right to allow your company to change the corporate structure, and you have to go to Oracle after the fact, you essentially have to pay money to Oracle. It could be that you need to buy new licenses for the divested entity. you might have to pay money in order to change the contracts. Nothing is free when it comes to Oracle. If you go to Oracle and say, we would like to change our contract here, they're going to ask you for money. But if you actually ask for this contract term at the time of signature, you're going to save money.
That's very, very interesting. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. My dog, right.
Yeah. Oh, mate, I'm just on the phone with I'm doing an interview with someone. I'll call you back, yeah?
All right, yeah, please, Rick. Yeah, all right, mate, cheers. Good luck, good luck.
Sorry about that. There was someone knocking on the door, and my dogs were like barking.
No problem. Yeah. So, what is the best strategy to adopt to cover audits?
So there's only one thing what you need to do is you need to make Oracle license reviews annual. So you need to do an annual licensing review, because the mistake companies are making is that you do it once, and then you do the licensing review, and then you don't do it again, and then you're going to be non-compliant.
So effectively, you're saying to negotiate in the contract at the start of the contract, so that there's no ambiguity around when audits are. There's going to be an annual license review, and that's all there's going to be. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, okay. So we might cut this out here. So I misunderstood your question then, actually. So I thought like, okay, so you're asking about in the contract, right? What is the best strategy to adopt to cover audits in the contract? Okay.
Yeah.
So ask the question again. I'll answer that question. Right.
Okay. In the negotiation of a contract, Frederick, what is the best strategy to adopt with regard to audits?
So you need to, this is negotiated in the Oracle Master Agreement. And Oracle did a change in their audit clause last year. And it was the first change they made in 20 years. And they are now mandating companies to run their audit tools when there's an audit. And you need to negotiate that audit clause based on your security demands. So typically Oracle, I think the best way to negotiate this is when you're making a purchase. You can then negotiate a no audit clause for up to 3 years. And that is really the only way that you can cover yourself in an audit.
And then, of course, after 3 years, there'll be an audit.
Well, it's not mandatory, actually. It really depends. It's not always, or you can just say, hey, we would like to have a no audit clause from Oracle. And obviously, it's not easy to get. So if you're not making a purchase for, £1 million and upwards, you are not going to get that. And typically, this is not an area where you can negotiate much with Oracle.
Okay, but typically you think 3 years is probably the best position you could get. Yeah.
If you're making a very large purchase, and then it's probably over £5 million, because it's typically you don't negotiate the audit clause in the Oracle agreement. It is more important that you negotiate or basically do this annual licensing reviews. Because what will happen if Oracle would do an audit of your company, and they will see that you are compliant, they will most likely not be auditing you again.
Okay, so in a way, it cuts both ways. If you think you're in good shape, then why wouldn't you do it? Yeah. Okay. Please describe an ideal medium to long-term strategy for dealing with Oracle support.
So can you elaborate on that question a bit more, Ricky?
What is the best way to go about negotiating in a contract a 3 to sort of 5 year plus strategy for your support? Are there fixed levels of support you can negotiate at the start? Is there an ability for flexibility? What are the options? What are the best ways to consider, best points to consider when you're negotiating the support?
So with Oracle support, it's basically at the 22% of whatever you paid in licenses will be in annual support. And that support will also go up by 4% every year. And typically, you have very little room to negotiate with Oracle at all on support renewals. It is once you've signed a contract with Oracle about support, you have virtually almost no chance to reduce that by negotiation. Your only chance to reduce Oracle support is to actually figure out what licenses you are using and what you're not. Because typically, an average Oracle customer, approximately 30% of the licenses are unused or can be optimized. So in order to if you want to reduce your Oracle support, it is not done by negotiating with Oracle. That's sort of this fault is, and I think many people in the industry knows that you can't really negotiate with the annual support renewals. If you really want to reduce the support, it is that you need to figure out what are the licenses you're using and understand which you're not. Because if you're not using licenses, you can then terminate those licenses and support. That is the secret way. Maybe it's not as sexy or simple, but that is the way you reduce your Oracle support spend. I think the only thing you can negotiate with Oracle when it comes to Oracle renewal support is this annual increase, which you might get down to 0.
Okay, so there's a couple of very useful tips there.
Yes, but ultimately, so I've been in this business now for 6 years since leaving Oracle, and I've spoken to a lot of IT procurement people, Ricky, and they're like, "Hey, how can I negotiate my support renewal?" And they're not looking for a 4% reduction, right? They're looking for 20 or 30% reduction. And usually, in my experience, is that hey, I gave them sort of this is what you can do, but it feels like a lot of companies are lacking the will or the project to actually do the actions required to save money, because it's not done by simply talking to a few people, then giving Oracle a call and negotiating. It's actually you need to sort of take the whole, because you can't terminate any. Let's say that you want to terminate some licenses, but you can't terminate licenses if you actually need them, right? So you need to be sure of your licensing position before you start doing that. My own experience after doing over 100 licensing reviews, 30% of your licenses are either unused or can be optimized, or potentially you can downgrade. Often companies that purchase enterprise edition products when they can be perfectly fine with standard edition products, and the standard edition products are maybe 20% of the cost of enterprise edition.
And this would be something that you'd negotiate at the time of the renewal of the support.
So what you could do is you review your estate, and then you understand, hey, we have a lot of enterprise edition licenses here. You cannot downgrade, so you basically just go and buy standard edition and terminate the enterprise edition, and then you're going to save a lot of money.
Okay, that's very good.
So the savings are not really done by any type of negotiation. The real savings is done by figuring out unused software, how to optimize the licensing, and then also downgrading.
Okay. Can you advise the benefits of using third-party support providers like Rimini Street and Spinnaker compared to negotiating directly with Oracle for support?
So third-party support providers has been around now for quite some years, and their business model is quite simple. They offer whatever you're paying to Oracle in support, they're willing to give you the same support for 50% of the price. But it's a big difference, is that once you leave Oracle, you do not have the right to download the latest patch or updates for Oracle software. So essentially, you're terminating, because Oracle support is also support and updates. That's what it says in the support renewal. So it's not only support, it is also the right to update your Oracle software. So if you're running Oracle 18, you can freely update to Oracle 20 as long as you have active support.
Yeah, so you're effectively, what you'd be doing is, if you go with a third party, it's a static license.
Yes, and you would basically be forced to purchase the whole license again and support, because you can't just go back to Oracle that easy and just say, hey, I would like to have support again.
Yeah, so you couldn't go at a later stage. You couldn't be static at 18 and a year later want to go up to 18 and say, can I just pay for that upgrade? You've got to buy a new license.
Or basically go to Oracle and say, I would like to go back to support. But Oracle has sort of, in order to stop customers doing exactly what you just suggested, Ricky, Oracle have some support policy text saying that if you go back to us, if you, let's say that you stop paying maintenance today, which is the 24th of July, and then you go back and go to Oracle in 1 year and want to go back to support, Oracle will say, sure, you can come back to support, but you have to pay backdated support. You have to pay support for the whole year backwards, and there's a penalty fee of 100% of your annual support. So they're basically forcing people to keep on paying maintenance all the time with this contract text.
So you have to pay a backdated fee to go from 18 to 20, let's say, and then 100% fee, penalty fee.
Yeah. And obviously, yes, sometimes there's cases where you can actually negotiate this away, or you can just go back to support. But what is happening is that there's no guarantee that negotiation will succeed. And my experience is that people who are actually usually, if this is critical systems, people want to have the latest updates, security patches, and there might be even regulation requirements to keep on having that. It is, but you have to weigh this toward, okay, there's going to be a 50% saving here versus what are we getting, and some companies are actually in a position where we need to make these cost savings to survive with our business, especially in the COVID-19 area, where companies might be forced to make that choice.
Okay, yeah, good point. Are there instances where negotiating, I'd like to draw the comparison now, and you've probably already answered this, but sort of drawing the comparison with the negotiating directly with Oracle for support?
So I think simply, if you're the customers that are moving to third-party support like Spinnaker, they are typically the application on-premise companies that have already made the decision to leave for another application, let's say Workday or anything else, but they might have to keep on running their Oracle application on-premise for a few years because you're not switching overnight. And then instead of paying Oracle this 100% of the support fees, well, you don't need the support anymore. It's a mature environment. For them, it makes sense to go with Spinnaker, for example, because then you're basically going to leave Oracle in a few years anyway.
Then you could find yourself in a position where, if Oracle are aware of that, they'll try to keep you by doing something more favorable.
Actually, Oracle is not really, they're usually not that keen. They don't make any offers. And it's the same, if you let's say you're going to Oracle and there's telling Oracle support, hey, we're going to go to Spinnaker, Rimini Street, and if you don't give us a better offer, Oracle is not going to give you a better offer for that, right? They might do, but then you basically have to have a ready contract here from Spinnaker or Rimini Street to show Oracle. And typically, if you have a ready contract from Spinnaker or Rimini Street, you have done many months of conversations with the third-party provider, and you might have already made your decision. But I think, at least if I were working at the company, before I make like the final dot of signing with the third-party provider, I would just take, maybe 1 month before, I would just take this contract and show Oracle what can you do about it. I think in 8 or 9 times of 10, Oracle is not going to say anything. They're just going to have, they're just going to see the business go away. But maybe 1 in 10, they can actually make a better offer.
So you think a 10% chance
that they could do something, yeah, because I've heard, we're living in a small industry, and I've heard Oracle doing sometimes something, but when I was working at Oracle never budged. It could have been, hey, we are terminating our whole contract, and if you don't lower the support, and Oracle wouldn't lower the support anyway.
Okay, that's good, very useful to know. Thanks very much. I think you may well have alluded to this earlier, actually, but we understand that Oracle, unlike other large software companies, don't have a discount structure for when you purchase licenses. Typically, what does a customer need to spend to be able to get maximum discount, in your opinion?
Well, maximum discount. So I've seen a contract where it was $10 million, and it was 99% discount. Yep. So when the contract becomes so big, Oracle doesn't really care about the discount. They just care about the dollar value on the contract.
The dollar value on the contract?
Yeah, so they have to...
1% of 10 million now, but it did say it was 10 million though.
Yeah, so basically when you have like, hey, I want to invest $10 million, Oracle might just throw in more and more software they're not looking at the discount anymore.
So there's an opportunity, you're saying, as well, with some contracts to get extra software and things thrown in.
Absolutely, as long as you remain the same, the dollar value on the contract. Well, actually, I mean, if you want to have the highest discount, it's a ULA, right? Because then you can have 99.99% discount, effective discount on it. That's like the best agreement. Typically, I think every company now have to realize that you are going to receive far less discounts from Oracle in the coming 5 years for on-premise software. Be prepared for that. And as I mentioned earlier, you should be looking at getting a fixed price for up to 5 years for Oracle software, because that could be golden the day when Oracle stops giving a discount completely. Because Oracle is copying the other vendors in so many ways. And I think what Microsoft and others have done is that they stop giving discount for on-premise products, and they say to the customer, we only give discount on the cloud product. So if you go into Oracle, I want to buy an Oracle database. Oracle is going to say, yeah, we have our on-premise software here, and then we have our cloud service. Both of them are database. And Oracle wants you to buy the cloud. They don't want you to buy the on-premise anymore.
I see.
And how can you do that? You can do that. How can you persuade your customer to buy the cloud? You do that by giving discounts on the cloud.
Yeah. Okay, that's very useful. Thanks very much for that. A typical problem that many companies face when signing up to an EULA, where it is all encompassing for a period of time, is that there is the inability to with elements of the software to get that terminated. How do you suggest that companies think about this when they're first negotiating their contract, or how would they also deal with it mid-contract?
So this is typically Oracle ULA is you make a trade-off. Anything you include in a ULA, you will not be able to partially terminate. So essentially you might have 100 different Oracle support agreements before ULA, and at that time you can terminate support and licenses whenever you don't need them. Contractually, you can terminate 50 or 99 of them, or 5 or 10. But once you sign a ULA, all of those contracts will become one contract, and you do no longer have the right to terminate any of that support cost. and all your old support costs will be part of that ULA. And the mistake that the companies are making is that they don't understand this mechanism. They think that we sign a ULA, it's unlimited, and they think it's great. But then the moment where you don't need software anymore, you can never reduce the Oracle support spend at all. So
until the term of the contract expires.
Even when the contract expires, you only have one choice, and that is basically terminate all your support on Oracle software.
So you should then, in that instance, be thinking very carefully about the benefits of an EULA, which is all encompassing, but should be then looking as well at whether you should have a number of agreements, depending on what the software is, to have the opportunity, should you wish in the future, depending on what your roadmap is, to be able to negotiate. Is that what you're saying? And terminate?
Yes, because what you might, ULA might be a great agreement, but the ULA should be for the products that you know that you're going to be using for 15, 20 years. But many companies have made a mistake is that you go to Oracle and say, you're talking about the ULA, and you're talking about, let's say, database ULA. But then Oracle say, hey, you can get a ULA for your BI, for your WebLogic, for the same price almost, or just a little more. And you as a customer might think, oh, but that's a great idea. Then we can have unlimited on WebLogic, Oracle Business Intelligence, Oracle applications, and you just include them in the agreement without knowing that, hey, in 4 years, the people using WebLogic might want to use something different. And then you're going to be hanging with and those business owners who are used to paying the cost of the ULA for WebLogic, they're coming to you and saying, yeah, but we're moving to JBoss now, and we want to stop paying the WebLogic support that we have in our ULA. And then you have to tell them, well, that's impossible. You're not going to make any savings. And typically what's happening is the companies that sign these big ULAs, they have a lot of legacy support and paying support for products they're no longer using.
Okay, yeah. So that's something. Obviously, that's I would imagine a very, very key consideration, as you quite rightly point out. So the last one is one that I think is going to be a great interest to all people in IT, really, particularly from a cost saving perspective. So describe the benefits and ROI of software asset management on large Oracle estates, and what size does the estate need to be before the company could see some real benefits?
So can we just wait a moment? I have a very good slide to explain this, actually, because this is better explained with the slide. Let's just do this again, this question. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'll just show you what I'm thinking, basically. Application window. Oops. So this is I'm just reminding myself what this is like about it. Okay. Yeah, I'll just do it like this. Okay, so because I think maybe I'm just going to go back to this. When you ask this question, I'm just going to do like this.
Okay, I'll ask it again then, yeah?
Sorry, what did you say?
I'll ask it again, shall I?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Okay, so final question, Frederick, I think is a very important one. It's going to be of interest to not just procurement people, but IT in general. So can you describe the benefits and the ROI of software asset management on a large Oracle estate, and what size does the estate typically need to be before benefits can be seen?
So that's a really good question, and the estate doesn't have to be that large, but I'll show you a slide that I think explains this very well. So this is just an explanation. Oracle database, for example, we're using it in this example. If you want to license 4 cores of Intel, which is a very small machine, I think nowadays you can only get 6 or 8 cores minimum. But if you license 4 cores of Intel, that would be a license fees of $115,900, including support. And just to know that 95% of all Oracle license audits results in a shortfall larger than $500,000. So when I help companies, some of our clients have 35, 40, 100 million pounds of being non-compliant. The average non-compliance figure approximately of what you purchased is 27%. And I often estimate that 90% of all the findings that we find that if we do a license review in SAM, is that 90% of all your Oracle non-compliance is mistakes or deployed incorrectly because someone misunderstood the licensing rules, the licensing policies. And if we just use this example here, that if you would have today 50 processes of Oracle Database Enterprise Edition, which is sort of a small Oracle customers in many ways, the purchase value of that would be $2.9 million. And if we just estimate that 27% of this is not compliant, we're talking about almost $782,000 in non-compliance. And if you just are able to adjust this by basically doing the licensing review, you can then sort of remediate and change your IT infrastructure around so that you can reduce $704,000. Does this make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think that's very useful. Yeah.
And typically, this is very conservative, Ricky. Typically, the savings are much, much bigger. And it's just to be very sort of, I think the best way to look at it is like looking at the Oracle technology price list, which is public. You can Google for it. Just have a look at it and look at the costs. And you can see the savings that you can make. And many companies make the mistake is that, yeah, we can be audited by Oracle. And if we are overusing, surely we will pay, which is, obviously you should pay for whatever you're overusing. But so many times it's simply that someone in your IT has deployed in a virtual environment, has deployed or activated something by mistake, not something that you actually need, but someone has turned on a feature that your business doesn't need, but it's going to cost you £1 million.
Yeah, I understand. So it's very important to understand your licensing position, and I can see that, and then we can really see the benefits of software asset management. Okay, thank you very much, Frederick. I think that's been very, very useful, and thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for all those questions you've answered.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Ricky.